There is a hidden pain that many people carry without ever talking about it. It is the pain of becoming an avoidant person's only safe space. At first, it feels like a privilege. It feels special. You tell yourself they trust me more than anyone else. You feel chosen. You feel important. You feel needed. But what most people don't realize is that being someone's only safe space can slowly become an emotional burden that drains your energy, your confidence, and eventually your sense of self. Because when one person becomes another person's entire emotional shelter, the relationship stops being balanced. Today, I want to talk about the silent cost that nobody warns you about. And if you've ever loved an avoidant, this message might change the way you see yourself forever. One of the most confusing experiences in a relationship with an avoidant is realizing that you can be their source of comfort without ever becoming their true priority. At first, everything feels meaningful. They share things with you that they don't share with other people. They let their guard down around you. They come to you when life feels overwhelming, stressful, or emotionally heavy. Naturally, this creates a sense of closeness. You begin to believe that because they trust you, the relationship must be moving towards something deeper. You assume that your importance in their emotional life will eventually be reflected in their actions. But this is where many people get hurt. An avoidant often seeks safety during moments of emotional discomfort. When they feel lonely, confused, anxious, or disconnected from the world, they may reach out to the one person who makes them feel understood. They may spend hours talking to you. They may become surprisingly vulnerable. They may even express feelings that make you believe they are finally opening their heart. In those moments, you feel valued, you feel chosen. You feel like the connection is becoming stronger than ever. Then something unexpected happens. As soon as the emotional storm passes, they begin to retreat. The person who seemed deeply connected yesterday suddenly becomes distant today. Messages become shorter. Conversations become less frequent. The warmth that felt so real seems to disappear without explanation. You find yourself replaying every interaction, trying to understand what changed. You wonder if you said something wrong. You wonder if they lost interest. You wonder why someone who appeared to need you so much can suddenly act as though they don't need you at all. The reality is that many avoidants are comfortable receiving comfort, but uncomfortable with sustained emotional dependence. When intimacy begins to feel too close, they instinctively create distance, not necessarily because they dislike you, but because closeness can trigger fears they may not even fully understand themselves. As a result, they move toward you when they need emotional relief and move away when they start feeling emotionally exposed. This creates a painful cycle for the other person. You begin investing more and more energy, hoping that your patience, understanding, and consistency will eventually make you a permanent priority in their life. You convince yourself that if you just love them a little better, support them a little longer, or prove your loyalty a little more, they will finally choose you the way you have chosen them. But relationships cannot thrive on potential. They thrive on mutual effort. Someone can genuinely appreciate your presence and still fail to prioritize you. Someone can trust you and still be unwilling to build a healthy, consistent connection. Someone can need your support and still not be ready to give you the same level of emotional investment in return. That is why it is so important to understand the difference between being someone's emotional refuge and being someone's priority. One provides temporary comfort. The other requires commitment, consistency, and intentional effort. And if you don't recognize that difference, you may spend years giving your best to someone who only reaches for you when they need a place to rest. When you become an avoidant safe space, it often starts from a place of compassion. You see someone who struggles to trust, struggles to express emotions, and struggles to let people get close. Because you care about them, you naturally want to help. You become the person who listens when nobody else will. You become the person who stays calm when they withdraw. You become the person who tries to understand what lies beneath their silence. At first, it feels like an act of love. It feels meaningful to be the one person they can rely on. But over time, something subtle begins to happen. Without realizing it, you start carrying emotional weight that was never meant to belong to you. You begin monitoring their moods. If they seem distant, you immediately wonder what is wrong. If they become quiet, you search for explanations. If they pull away, you feel responsible for bringing them back. Their emotional state starts affecting your emotional state. A good day for them becomes a good day for you. A bad day for them becomes a bad day for you. Slowly, your peace becomes connected to their behavior. You start spending mental energy trying to solve problems that they have not chosen to solve themselves. You replay conversations in your head, looking for clues. You analyze every message, every pause, every shift in tone. You become emotionally invested in managing their feelings, even when they are unwilling to take responsibility for those feelings on their own. The exhausting part is that this process rarely happens all at once. It happens little by little. One day you're offering support. The next day you're offering reassurance. Then you're offering patience. Then you're making excuses for their behavior. Before long, you find yourself carrying the emotional burden of two people instead of one. You tell yourself that they just need more understanding. You tell yourself that they have been hurt before. You tell yourself that if you can be strong enough, patient enough, and loving enough, everything will eventually work out. But emotional support and emotional responsibility are two very different things. Supporting someone means walking beside them while they do their own work. Taking responsibility for them means trying to do the work on their behalf. Many people who love avoidance unknowingly cross that line. They become caretakers instead of partners. They become emotional managers instead of equals. They spend so much time trying to keep the relationship stable that they neglect their own emotional needs. They carry the pressure of maintaining connection while the other person remains comfortably distant. And because they care deeply, they often don't notice how drained they have become until they reach a breaking point. The truth is that no amount of love can heal someone who is unwilling to face their own fears. No amount of patience can replace personal growth. No amount of sacrifice can do another person's emotional work for them. Every healthy relationship requires two people taking responsibility for themselves. The moment one person becomes responsible for everyone's feelings, everyone's healing, and everyone's emotional stability, the relationship becomes unbalanced. And when a relationship becomes unbalanced for long enough, even the strongest, most caring person eventually begins to feel exhausted, overwhelmed, and emotionally depleted by a weight they were never meant to carry. One of the most painful things about becoming an avoidance-only safe space is that your own needs can slowly disappear without you even noticing. It doesn't happen overnight. There is no single moment when you consciously decide that your feelings no longer matter. Instead, it happens through a series of small compromises that seem harmless at first. You tell yourself you're being understanding. You tell yourself you're being patient. You tell yourself that relationships require sacrifice. But eventually, those small compromises begin to add up. And one day you realize that you've been giving far more than you've been receiving. When someone is emotionally avoidant, their fears and struggles often become the center of the relationship. You spend so much time trying to understand why they pull away, why they need space, why they struggle with vulnerability, and why they seem uncomfortable with closeness. Your attention becomes focused on their emotional world. You study their patterns. You anticipate their reactions. You adjust your behavior to avoid triggering their discomfort. In the process, you stop paying attention to yourself. You stop asking important questions. Are your emotional needs being met? Do you feel supported? Do you feel valued? Do you feel secure in the relationship? Instead of examining whether the relationship is healthy, you become consumed with figuring out how to make the relationship easier for them. You begin accepting things that you would never have accepted at the beginning. You tolerate inconsistency because you understand their fears. You tolerate distance because you know they struggle with intimacy. You tolerate silence because you believe they need time to process. Every time your needs clash with their comfort, you choose their comfort. At first, this may feel like love, but over time, it becomes self-abandonment. You stop expressing disappointment because you don't want to pressure them. You stop communicating your desires because you don't want to seem demanding. You stop asking for reassurance because you don't want to appear needy. Gradually, your authentic voice becomes quieter and quieter. The relationship begins revolving around what they can handle rather than what both people deserve. The tragedy is that many people don't realize how much they have lost until they feel emotionally exhausted. They look back and notice that they have spent months or even years adapting themselves to fit another person's limitations. They have become experts at understanding someone else's boundaries while completely ignoring their own. A healthy relationship should create space for both people's needs to exist. It should not require one person to consistently suppress their feelings in order to maintain peace. Real connection is not built on one person's comfort alone. It is built on mutual care, mutual effort, and mutual respect. Your needs are not obstacles. Your desires are not inconveniences. Your emotions are not burdens that need to be hidden away to make someone else comfortable. The more you ignore your own needs, the more disconnected you become from yourself. And when you lose connection with yourself, you begin settling for less than what you truly deserve. You start accepting emotional crumbs while convincing yourself they are enough. But no relationship is worth sacrificing your voice, your happiness, or your sense of self the moment your needs become invisible. The relationship stops being a partnership and starts becoming a one-sided emotional investment that slowly drains the very person trying hardest to keep it alive. One of the deepest emotional traps people fall into when loving an avoidant is that they begin measuring their worth through the avoidance responses. At first, it seems harmless. You simply care about the relationship. So, naturally, their behavior affects you. If they seem happy to hear from you, you feel encouraged. If they appear distant, you feel disappointed. That's normal in any connection. But when the relationship becomes inconsistent, something more dangerous begins to happen. Your emotional state starts depending on their level of attention. A message from them can brighten your entire day. A delayed response can ruin it. Their affection makes you feel valuable. Their withdrawal makes you question yourself. Without realizing it, you slowly hand over control of your self-worth to another person. This is especially common when dealing with avoidance because their behavior often fluctuates. One week they seem engaged, interested, and emotionally available. The next week they become distant, distracted, or difficult to reach. That inconsistency creates emotional highs and lows. When they move closer, you feel rewarded. When they move away, you feel rejected. Instead of asking whether their behavior is healthy, you begin asking what is wrong with you. You start looking for flaws in yourself. Maybe you're too emotional. Maybe you're too available. Maybe you're asking for too much. Maybe you're not attractive enough, interesting enough, or important enough. A focus shifts away from the reality of the relationship and towards self-criticism. The painful irony is that many caring and loving people end up questioning their value because of someone else's inability to maintain emotional consistency. Think about how much power that gives another person. When their attention determines your confidence, they control something they were never meant to control. When their approval determines your happiness, your emotional well-being becomes dependent on circumstances you cannot manage. You begin chasing signs that you matter instead of recognizing that your value already exists. This creates a cycle that can become addictive. You constantly seek reassurance, you wait for messages. You search for evidence that they still care. Every small sign of affection feels significant because it temporarily relieves the anxiety created by their distance. But relief is not the same thing as security. Real security comes from knowing who you are regardless of how someone else behaves. Your worth cannot be measured by how quickly someone replies. It cannot be measured by how often someone chooses you. It cannot be measured by whether someone is emotionally available enough to appreciate everything you bring into their life. The truth is that valuable people get ignored. Valuable people get misunderstood. Valuable people sometimes love individuals who are incapable of giving them what they deserve. None of those experiences reduce their value. When you tie your self-esteem to another person's actions, you place yourself on an emotional roller coaster. Every interaction becomes a test. Every period of distance feels like a verdict on your worth. But your value was never supposed to be decided by someone else's ability to recognize it. Your confidence should come from your character, your growth, your integrity, and the way you show up in the world. The moment you stop asking another person to confirm your worth is the moment you begin reclaiming the power that was always yours to begin with. One of the quietest yet most damaging costs of becoming an avoidance-only safe space is that you can gradually lose your identity without realizing it. The process is so subtle that most people don't notice it until they look back and barely recognize the person they used to be. It begins with good intentions. You care about someone deeply, and because you care, you want to create an environment where they feel comfortable, understood, and accepted. There is nothing wrong with that. The problem begins when their comfort becomes more important than your authenticity. At first, the adjustments seem small. You choose your words more carefully. You avoid certain topics. Because you know they make the avoidant uncomfortable, you become mindful of how often you reach out because you don't want to overwhelm them. You give them extra space because you know they value independence. These compromises may seem reasonable in the beginning, but over time they can become a pattern. Little by little, you start editing yourself. You stop saying what you truly feel because you're worried it might push them away. You stop expressing disappointment because you don't want to create pressure. You stop asking questions because you don't want to appear demanding. Instead of communicating naturally, you begin calculating every interaction. You become focused on managing their reactions rather than expressing your truth. The relationship slowly shifts from being a place where you can be yourself to a place where you must constantly monitor yourself. You become hyper-aware of what might make them retreat. Every conversation feels like something that must be handled carefully. Every emotional need feels like something that should be minimized. As this continues, something important begins to disappear. Your spontaneity fades. Your confidence weakens. Your voice becomes quieter. You spend so much energy adapting to another person's emotional limitations that you stop honoring your own emotional reality. You become an expert on their fears, their triggers, their boundaries, and their needs. Yet you lose touch with your own. Many people in this situation begin defining themselves by the role they play in the avoidance life. They become the understanding one, the patient one, the supportive one, the reliable one. While those qualities are admirable, they should never become the entirety of your identity. You are more than a caretaker. You are more than someone's emotional support system. You are more than the person who always understands. Healthy relationships allow both people to expand. They create an environment where honesty is welcomed, individuality is respected, and personal growth is encouraged. But when one person's comfort consistently takes priority over the other person's self-expression, growth becomes restricted. Eventually, you may wake up one day feeling disconnected from yourself. The hobbies you once loved receive less attention. The goals that once inspired you become secondary. The opinions you once expressed confidently are now filtered through concern about how someone else will react. The saddest part is that many people believe this sacrifice proves the depth of their love. But losing yourself is not proof of love. Shrinking yourself is not proof of commitment. Silencing yourself is not proof of loyalty. Real love should strengthen your identity, not erase it. It should encourage you to become more fully yourself, not force you to hide parts of who you are. The moment you begin abandoning your own needs, desires, and personality to maintain a connection, the relationship stops nurturing your growth and starts quietly taking pieces of you away. Many people believe that the highest form of love is sacrifice. They believe that if they truly care about someone, they should be willing to give more, tolerate more, wait longer, and endure greater amounts of pain. They see boundaries as barriers to connection and assume that unconditional love means accepting everything without limits. This belief sounds noble, but in reality, it often leads people into relationships where they give endlessly while receiving very little in return. When you become an avoidance-only safe space, this mindset can become especially dangerous. Because you understand their fears, you may convince yourself that your role is to keep accommodating them. Every time they withdraw, you tell yourself to be more patient. Every time they become emotionally unavailable, you tell yourself to be more understanding. Every time your needs go unmet, you tell yourself that they are doing the best they can. Over time, sacrifice becomes a habit. You sacrifice your time. You sacrifice your energy. You sacrifice your emotional well-being. You sacrifice your peace. And eventually, you begin sacrificing parts of yourself. The problem is that endless sacrifice does not automatically create a healthy relationship. In fact, without boundaries, sacrifice often creates resentment, exhaustion, and emotional imbalance. One person keeps giving while the other becomes accustomed to receiving. One person keeps adjusting while the other never feels the need to grow. That is why boundaries are so important. Boundaries are not walls that keep people out. They are standards that protect what matters most. They define what you are willing to accept and what you are not willing to accept. They remind both people in a relationship that love and self-respect must exist together. Many people fear boundaries because they worry they will push others away, but healthy boundaries do not destroy genuine relationships. They strengthen them. They create clarity. They create accountability. They create mutual respect. When you establish boundaries with an avoidant, you stop taking responsibility for emotions that do not belong to you. You stop chasing someone who consistently pulls away. You stop abandoning your needs to maintain connection. You stop making excuses for behavior that repeatedly hurts you. Instead, you begin standing firmly in your own worth. You communicate your expectations clearly. You honor your own emotional needs. You recognize that your time and energy have value. Most importantly, boundaries allow the other person to take responsibility for themselves. When you constantly rescue someone from the consequences of their choices, you unintentionally prevent growth. But when you step back and allow them to face their own patterns, they are given the opportunity to learn, reflect, and change. Growth requires responsibility. Healing requires responsibility. Maturity requires responsibility. No amount of love can replace that. The strongest people are not those who sacrifice themselves endlessly for others. The strongest people are those who know how to love deeply without losing themselves in the process. They understand that kindness does not require self-neglect. They understand that compassion does not require self-abandonment. They understand that supporting someone does not mean carrying them. The moment you stop trying to be someone's entire emotional world, you reclaim your freedom. You stop living in reaction to another person's fears and start living according to your own values. You create space for healthier relationships, healthier expectations, and healthier connections. And perhaps most importantly, you finally give yourself permission to protect the one person you have been neglecting for far too long yourself. As we come to the end of this conversation, I want you to reflect on something that may be difficult to hear, but has the power to change your life. Loving someone should never require you to lose yourself. Caring about someone should never come at the cost of your own peace, your own identity, or your own emotional well-being. If you have spent months or even years being an avoidance-only safe space, ask yourself an honest question: who has been your safe space? While you've been carrying their fears, soothing their anxieties, and making room for their struggles, have you been making room for yourself? Because the truth is that you cannot pour endlessly into another person while neglecting your own emotional needs. Eventually, even the strongest heart becomes exhausted when it is constantly giving without being replenished. The reality is that many people confuse love with responsibility. They believe that if they love someone enough, they can heal them. If they stay patient enough, they can change them. If they sacrifice enough, they can finally earn the consistency and commitment they have been longing for. But relationships do not work that way. No amount of love can do another person's emotional work for them. No amount of loyalty can force someone to confront fears they are unwilling to face. And no amount of waiting can create readiness in someone who has not chosen growth for themselves. The moment you understand this, you stop carrying a burden that was never yours to carry. You stop trying to rescue people and start allowing them to take responsibility for their own journey. Perhaps the greatest lesson in all of this is that your value has never depended on someone's ability to choose you. Your worth is not determined by how much attention you receive, how often someone reaches out, or whether an avoidant finally decides to stay. Your value existed long before they entered your life, and it will continue to exist regardless of what they choose to do. The problem is that when you become focused on winning someone's love, you often forget the importance of protecting your own. You start chasing validation instead of recognizing your own worth. You start seeking approval instead of honoring your own standards. The strongest shift you can make is deciding that your self-respect is no longer negotiable. There comes a moment in every person's life when they must choose between preserving a connection and preserving themselves. That choice is never easy. It requires courage. It requires honesty. It requires the willingness to face uncomfortable truths. But the people who transform their lives are the ones who stop asking, how do I make them stay? And start asking, how do I become the person I am meant to be? They stop shrinking themselves to fit into someone else's comfort zone. They stop apologizing for having needs. They stop settling for uncertainty when they deserve clarity. And in doing so, they rediscover a level of confidence, peace, and personal power that no relationship could ever give them. So if there is one message I want you to remember after this speech, let it be this: you are not here to save people. You are not here to sacrifice yourself for someone else's healing. You are not here to become the emotional foundation for a person who refuses to build one for themselves. You are here to live fully, love wisely, and honor your own worth. Support people, care about people, and show compassion whenever you can. But never forget that the relationship you have with yourself sets the standard for every other relationship in your life. The day you stop abandoning yourself for the sake of someone else's comfort is the day your true strength begins to emerge. And when that happens, you no longer become someone's only safe space, you become your own. Thank you so much for spending your time with me today. If this message spoke to your heart, I hope you remember that your value is not defined by who stays, who leaves, or who struggles to see your worth. Your value comes from who you are, the strength you've shown, and the person you continue to become every single day. Life is too precious to spend it chasing validation from people who are unable to give you the consistency, respect, and emotional investment you deserve. If this speech helped you see your situation from a new perspective, take a moment to reflect on the lessons we've discussed today. Sometimes the greatest transformation begins with a single realization, the realization that you deserve the same love, care, and understanding that you so freely give to others. Never be afraid to choose your peace, protect your energy, and honor your self-respect. Thank you again for being here, for listening, and for being part of this journey. If you enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who may need to hear this message today. Until next time, keep growing, keep believing in yourself, and keep becoming the strongest version of who you are. Take care of yourself. Stay focused on your growth. And remember, the moment you stop abandoning yourself is the moment your life begins to change. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Goodbye, and have an amazing day.